Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. The name's Paul Reid. I'm the VP of Adversary Research at AttackIQ. I get the pleasure of working with our adversary research team, looking at the ongoing emerging cyber threats that are taking place in our countries and in our nations. I work directly with our clients and with our researchers to identify the ongoing emerging cyber threats that people care about. We really want to help our customers and in general the marketplace be more secure, right? We all know it's only a matter of time before you're attacked or breached,
Yep.
but it's what you do when it takes place that's really important. So if we can help customers understand how well their compensating controls work, when a breach maybe take place or is taking place, and know that if something does happen, they're protected, that's really, really important to them and also to us as well. So my background in cybersecurity really spans about the past 25 years. I started out early on working in Novell networks and setting up Novell directory services and moved into, in general, directory services with Novell and Microsoft, Active Directory, LDAP directory. Spent a lot of time there in the authentication authorization world. Moved into smart cards. Got a really cool opportunity to write some PKCS 11 libraries early on, which was a lot of fun. Got to grow up during the PKI growth days, right? The whole move from symmetrical to asymmetrical and public key encryption. That was exciting times. And then from there, I moved into a little bit stronger, I guess, aspects of cybersecurity, really looking at strong ways to authenticate, right? The something you are, something you know, something you have
Yep.
world. And that was a lot of fun. Spent some time there. And then I actually moved into a job where I was helping to design classification systems and classifying information, classifying documents to understand the value of what you have, because you can't protect what you don't know.
Yep.
So you got to have good value there and understand what you have. From there, I was very fortunate to move into a startup that was focused on user and entity behavioral analytics. Learned a lot about data science and big data and did some programming in R. And from there, I actually got the opportunity to run a worldwide threat hunting team where we actively hunted and tracked nation-state actors across the world for several years and got to do daily hand-to-hand combat with some of those guys. And that was a really interesting, and if you really want to learn what's happening in the world, become a threat hunter. You'll really see another side of cybersecurity. And what was really brought me into AttackIQ was my time doing threat hunting. There were so many times when we'd be threat hunting, and my team and I would stop and go, if they'd only done this, if they'd only done that. And so the opportunity at AttackIQ to do that breach attack simulation and being able to answer that questions, have you had and will you do the things you need to do to be secure? That's really what drew me to AttackIQ. Now, at the end of the day, our team's motto is think bad, do good, right? We want to think like a bad guy and help do good things for our customers.
I like that. So, going into this career, was this always where you wanted to be, or has just been kind of the normal evolution, or did you go kicking and screaming into this?
So going into university, leaving university, my goal was to be a banker. My degree's in economics. It was only through an economic downturn where the bank I was going to work for got rid of my position that I really went back to my first passion, which was computers and computer science. Got hired into a number of companies early on, working with them, and really, my degree in economics combined with business acumen has taken me really far in my
Yeah.
career. I think that's something very unique that more of us need is that understanding of business because as we're going to talk about today with ransomware, right? That's a business-driven decision. So if you understand businesses, especially in today's world of cybersecurity, it's really important. So yeah, it really happened kind of organically. I led from one thing to another. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great world experiences and being able to grow up in our industry and see it mature and evolve to what it is today.
I love that. I totally agree that I think whatever your skill set is, you also need to have some understanding of how business works because that drives the decisions that your team needs to make or that your team needs to respond to, whether you're in the cybersecurity department, you're in the legal department, even if you're in customer service, knowing why the company's doing what it does really helps you do your job better.
Well, we see a lot of the cyber threats today are driven economically, right? It's about ransomware, it's about generating revenue. It's not necessarily about, standing up for a particular thing or the hacktivism stuff that it started out to be. Really now it's a big business, right? You look at ransomware as a service and things like that. And the hundreds of millions and potentially billions of dollars in losses being generated from it. It truly is a business activity.
Yeah. So before we go do a deep dive on ransomware, because you're in cybersecurity, I want to ask you the question that I ask such guests is, have you ever been a victim of a cybersecurity incident, fraud, or a scam?
So I got a couple interesting stories there. One company I was at was back in the early days where people were just figuring out a lot of the attacks using email and faking emails and fraudulent emails and things like that. Our director of finance received an email proposedly from our CEO saying to transfer not a large sum of money, it was like $20,000 to a particular supplier. And at the time, our company was growing, we were doing a lot of trade shows, so there was a lot of weird names coming through, the payouts of all the different places we were going to, and it only happened to be from a hallway conversation that we kind of bumped into each other, and other people were there that they mentioned, hey, I got to transfer this money for our CEO, and he needs it done quickly because we're trying to get our booth space or whatever it was. And we all just kind of said, well, that seems really strange. Like, I haven't heard about that. Have you heard about that? No, I haven't heard about that. And so we went back and we looked at the email and come to find out one of the letters had been replaced with a Cyrillic character.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those so easy. It could happen to anybody, right? You've probably seen those ones online where someone pushes something on and goes, tell me what's wrong with this message or tell me what's wrong with this email. And a lot of time it comes down to that O or that I or that E isn't quite right.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy, just in human nature, just to read past it. So that one was really interesting. I think one of my favorite stories is actually an application of cybersecurity in the real world. About 5 years ago, my daughter was on a study abroad program in London, and she called us one night and said there is a pop-up for Fallout Boy being stood up, and Pete Wentz was going to be there. And so she was going early morning, like 1 a.m., to go stand in line to make sure she got in. Only the first 100 people were getting in. So when she got there, there was 4 or 5 people already in line and struck up conversation with them. And come to find out, some of the people who were there ahead of her said, last time they had one of these, that there was a huge lineup and then just a huge crush of people at the end pushed their way to the front, and all the people who've been there all night didn't get a chance to get in. So my daughter, God bless her, she's so smart. She thought of the idea of blockchain, actually. So what she did was they each signed each other's hand with a number. So
Ah.
they created a chain of custody of people in line. So what happened, just like they said, when the doors opened, this crush of people showed up and they went up to the people in front and go, look at our hands. We signed each other's hands to know what order we arrived in. And sure enough, they honored that and they all got in the way they were supposed to. So that
I
was kind
love
of
that.
cool. That was a great one. Yeah, that was really cool.
And I like the story about the CEO's email in that the people in the company felt comfortable enough to talk about this. Something just seems just the slightest
Yeah.
bit off. That there was that environment where people were allowed to question. I mean, definitely, there's companies out there where it's like you don't question anything, you don't ask questions because that's bad, and we're the bosses. We tell you what to do.
I think being in a small cybersecurity startup, we all had that cybersecurity mindset because everyone was involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, right? Even the people in finance that they knew what we were doing from a cybersecurity standpoint. They were aware of the type of threats we were facing. And I think one of the things we need to talk more about is that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit you don't know, right? I've been in this industry now 25 plus years, and I'll often turn to my team and I'll send them stuff and go, does this make sense? Am I talking crazy? And you know what? We got to do more of that because that's how we're going to learn and grow. And if we're afraid to make mistakes, then we won't get the innovation we need. So I think it's really important to be open and honest when it comes to cybersecurity and ask for help.
Yeah, fear will definitely stunt a company's growth.
Sure will.
So let's talk. Let's do a deep dive into ransomware. So everybody has probably heard about ransomware, but let's do a little bit of primer. And what is ransomware?
So ransomware is an economically driven cybercrime, basically, right? Somebody wants to take something from you and hold it for ransom, right? In the old days, it was I'll steal your painting, I'll take your children, I'll steal money from a bank or a unique piece of information that you need. with the advent of the connected world, it becomes so much easier now to do those type of attacks. So a ransomware attack, the attackers want to get in through whatever method they can, whether that be social engineering or a brute force attack or password spraying, whatever it is. And once they in, they want to identify the things of highest value to you. And once they identify those items of highest value, they're going to take control of them and potentially encrypt them in place, exfiltrate them, and so on, possibly do, extortion-based ransomware as well. So it's a growing trend. We're seeing it more and more. And the reason why is it pays, right? If you think about the old adage of mass marketing, right? If you have
Yeah.
1,000 things you mail out and you get a 1% response rate, you're highly successful. Same thing with
Yep.
ransom. They land, thousands of attacks and 5 or 10% payout. That adds up really quick.
Yeah. And so what is the difference between the concept of like ransomware and ransomware as a service?
So I think what we saw is an evolution from the standalone one use ransomware thing where these larger organizations like Lockbit and others have realized that by building out an affiliate network, they can get more done, right? We're human, right? We only do so much in a day. And it's really interesting when you do some of the analysis on the ransomware attacks, the activity, a lot of them appear just to be a 9 to 5 job,
Hmm.
right? They show up to work, they clock in, they do their thing, they go home. And I think by creating the ransomware as a service and building out that affiliate network, it's really brought ransomware, to the masses, right? It's so easy now to pay some money, point and click, deploy, and you're now a ransomware as a service affiliate and going after different organizations. So, if I'm a group like Lockbit and I can go after X number of companies a year, but if I have my affiliates and we can go after 20 or 30 times that, then if I'm taking a small percentage of those, I'm still making more money than I did before. And again, as we talked about before, it's become economics. It's a business all onto itself.
Is it a little bit of that they're trying to, in a sense, keep their hands clean? Well, we weren't the ones who did the infiltration. Like they just used our software. That's not our fault.
So that's really interesting, right? We actually saw the past couple of days with the release of the Black Basta chat logs, right? Some of the conversations they have about, hey, if someone pays us a ransom, we actually got to do what we say we do. We got to deliver value for money, or people are not going to pay us. We also saw in those logs too conversations about, we shouldn't be, targeting children's hospitals or emergency services or things like that. So does that mean the bad guys actually have a heart after all? Don't know. It really seemed to be more of it'd be bad for business, right? Be
Yeah.
bad for business if you're seeing targeting these vulnerable sectors and these vulnerable people. So yeah, it's certainly an ever evolving threat.
And it's a very it's in a sense because it's a criminal organization. It's this weird balance of we have to be ethical about our lack of ethics.
That's right.
I mean, we have to be honest thieves because if we don't unlock when people have paid, when they've paid to get their stuff unlocked, then people aren't going to pay to have it unlocked.
No, exactly right. And what's really interesting about that is we also see a lot of these, I'm sure you receive them and the listeners have received them too, those emails saying, hey, I've got compromising information
Yep.
on you. Just send me a quarter of a Bitcoin, right? I won't let everyone know this compromising information I have about you. And some of that comes out of the fact that we have the news articles about these ransomware gangs and the others actually delivering what they said they would,
Yeah.
right? But now these other scammers, they're like, hey, I'm gonna, play off of that and live off of that by saying, if you pay me, then you're fine. Even though we know, us in the industry know there's very little chance what they're saying is actually
Yeah.
true. But for the average person, you have no way to do it. Another personal story, a relative of mine who runs a small business got one of those emails. He's like, what do I do? What should I do? And it was really interesting as we went through the actual request from the so-called attacker. It looks like they just took a whole lot of ransomware stories and
Yeah.
ransomware letters and threw it into a generative AI and said, generate me an attack focusing on this type of business, right? Because as you read through, there's certain inconsistencies in it. Like they were talking about using like Pegasus software, which we know is, mobile focused on that industry,
Yeah.
that they're going to attack their router with it and things like that. So I think that's one of the things we'll see.
And it's funny because the people are that's just playing on people's own fears. But I try to remember. So I get those probably I don't know, once a month or once a week or something like that. There was one time I got one that actually they had done some sort of merge with a data breach or something else, and they actually had additional information about me, and it was like, well, this stuff is clearly from a breach.
Yeah,
But I thought of like the person who doesn't know, isn't paying attention to data breaches, all of a sudden they see, oh, hey, I used that password at some point in a past life. Oh, that is my address. That is my zip code. Oh, that is my phone number. And all of a sudden, that threat looks a lot more real than just, well, you just take my email address off this, and it could be anybody.
right. Right. Well, we talk about that in an industry, right? About being able to create data that in and of itself may not be risky, but when you combine with other data sets, gives a much higher degree of risk. And that's exactly what you're talking about, where you take multiple pieces of information. Maybe they just, scrape the white pages of your local phone book and got some information from it and, got an address and a name, and then went to, one of those dump sites and found something that matched. You got an email address, and from there did, some basic OSINT and found out you had a Facebook account, and maybe you had some public posts on Facebook. One of the ones we investigated as a threat hunt team was a person was targeted, got a phishing email saying, "Hey, I was Joe in your fifth grade class. Here's a picture I found of my mom's after she died. It's a really great picture of us."
Oh,
Click,
wow.
right? And there was just enough believability in it. They had just enough information. And sure enough, you click on it and you're compromised.
Yeah, that's the scary thing is that with AI, you could now start merging all of this disparate data sources and start producing stuff that potentially looks more legitimate,
Yeah, absolutely.
and then scale it up to ridiculous levels.
Yes, yes.
So we were talking a little bit about Lockbit. What's the history of the Lockbit organization?
So they've been around for a while, right? They had some takedowns, they had some resurgences. They're almost like a really good Rocky movie, right? They're down and out, and then they and they come back again, right? We saw that I think it was around 2020 is when they really started out doing their things. And then we had the takedown of them, but they quickly rose back up, right? Part of it was because of the distributed nature and the resilient nature of ransomware as a service, right? They came back really fast. Uh, and it's that decentralized ransomware as a service model that allows the affiliates to keep on earning even if the main ones go down.
Wow.
And it allows them to persist beyond that. One of the things we saw that really potentially helped with that is if you think about the ability to not be detected in your attacks, right? One of the things we saw was that the certain parts of the ransomware attack lifecycle had a really good chance of persisting beyond initial detection. And that's a big problem. If you can't get rid of it and it sticks around, it's going to have a chance to grow back. Um, Again, the exfiltration detection rate last year in some of our testing was as low as 25%, which
Ooh.
is pretty low. So if you have the ability to remain active even while the system's being taken down and you can wait for it to come back or find other ways, you still have the ability to generate revenue and generate income, and people will continue to do it.
Is that a more common thing that you're seeing? Is that someone will gain access to a system and infrastructure and just sit silently enough in there for a long enough period of time that even if someone restores from a backup, they're still in there from the backup?
Well, there's actually two interesting points about that. It really depends upon the level of sophistication of the ransomware group. We've seen over the past several months, if not the past year, the more closer working of nation states with ransomware gangs and other criminal cyber gangs. They tend to be a little bit more patient in the work they do
Mhm.
because they have a longer term play. A lot of the ransomware as a service affiliates, they're more smash and grab,
Okay.
right? We just saw not that long ago, I think it was even this week, there was a DFIR report about a breach that took place. And from the time the initial breach took place until they left, it was like 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of them want to get in and get out, get quickly, get what they need. start the ransomware process and move on to the next victim. They don't want to give you necessarily a chance to detect them. So the time to detect is even becoming more and more important. And then, of course, the time to remediate and fix the attack is even more important.
It's almost as if like we just want to get our money as quickly as we can. If we can't get in, we're just going to move on to something else. And it's not, they're not really looking for how can I really, like, what other exploits can I do? It's just, let me just do this one thing and get my money.
Well, exactly right. And we actually see them branching out into other areas and increasing their attack surface, right? Targeting Linux and Mac OS. VMware ESXi services are another one that they're really going after. And they're expanding their evasion techniques, right? If we look at things like Lockbit 4 Green, I believe is how it's referred to. They employed advanced evasion techniques like API hashing and DLL proxy sideloading. And then again, in the command and control of that, right, being able to command and control a large ransomware team and group and inside the organization itself. If you look at the MITRE technique 1701, the application layer protocol, detection rates were as low as 20% in some cases. So again, the ability to avoid detection is something that these gangs rely upon. So we need to get better at detecting and preventing, but really detection is paramount.
Kind of what do you expect them to be doing going forward? Just getting better at what they do, or waiting longer, going faster?
I think that, despite our best efforts, ransomware is going to continue to thrive, right?
Yeah.
Despite our, right? Again, it's that resiliency of the ransomware as a service setup and how they've kind of distributed the risk across multiple affiliates, right? If one affiliate gets taken down, they can continue on doing ransomware in a different part of their affiliate network, right? We're seeing an evolution of these that they're really focused on the look and feel of their ransomware infrastructure now, right? The usability, point click fire type of things. You don't need to be an advanced level hacker now to do this stuff. And we really going to see it, we think, an expansion from ransomware as a service to malware as a service, right? It's
Yeah.
just a natural thing to add on to it. And of course, as much as we try, the increase of the ability to exploit other things like, VPNs and routers and edge devices for access, our attack surface is not getting smaller, it's only getting bigger. So you got to think that our best attempts, are always going to be the best things we do. No one goes to work thinking I'm going to be breached today or I want to be breached today. It's just the nature of the business we deal with. We have an ever-growing attack surface, and it's hard for us, right? We don't have unlimited budgets. We don't have unlimited people, unlimited resources. We have to really focus on the things that matter. So it's really important for us to start providing visibility to our customers of where the real threats are and where they're really coming from. We're doing a lot of work inside of our team to incorporate a lot more of what we're calling a proactive cyber threat intelligence into our ability to lead our customers to where the biggest risks are right now for them, right? Based upon the results we have about where they're lacking in their coverage or their resiliency or their mitigating controls, we can say, we think the following threat actors might be of interest to you. And if they are, they're going to use these type of tools and techniques, these type of CVEs. Oh, and by the way, we know that you have these falling parts of your infrastructure, these falling machines that might be susceptible to it. You may want to start there. So we got to be better at identifying the possible threats and then finding ways to address them as quickly as we can.
So when you're doing kind of threat emulation, in general, how successful are you and your team?
So, yeah, as I said at the outset, our motto is think bad, do good. The other one is do no harm.
Yeah.
One of the things we pride ourselves on is being able to run our emulations in a production environment. You don't have to take them to a lab or a test environment because everyone knows your lab and test environment, it's nothing like production, right? It's real world, it's dirty, it's not clean. People do silly things. So being able to actually do the testing in production is really important for us. What does that mean? It means that when we go to emulate certain attacks, we can't do everything, right? Because we would do harm. So we certainly do enough emulations in such a way that the mitigating controls should be able to detect and respond, detect and protect the customer from our attack so that they know if something did take place, they'd actually be protected. So an awful lot of times, it's not necessarily the damaging attack that is most detectable. It's oftentimes the reconnaissance or the installation of the attack tools or the lateral movement that is a really great opportunity to interdict these type of attacks before they become too bad. So we really focus our things on providing good overall coverage of the threats and then being able to give our customers a chance to make sure their compensating controls will actually protect them.
Gotcha. And what are some of the biggest mistakes that they're making, or noticeable, repeatable?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're hearing from a lot of our customers on the use of, our continuous threat emulation and our adversarial exploitation validation tools is they'll deploy mitigating controls and they'll set them up, configure them, but they are organic, right? They change over time. People will add new things to them, or the supplier will change a setting or how something works. And they may not necessarily know that's taking place, right? We don't have time to RTFM on every
Yeah.
release, right? But being able to know that having continuous testing and validation, they can find out if something has changed in their environment. That's really important. And the other thing that happens too is business happens, right?
Yeah.
A lot of time you will find out that I didn't know my company was doing that. And then some guy will go, oh yeah, we had a business need. And so we did the following. They go, well, you broke our cybersecurity. So by having the ability to continuously test and find those areas, that really makes them more cyber resilient and actually helps people sleep at night knowing that, hey, today we tested these things and
Yeah.
our controls worked.
And I can see the situation where, like, it makes sense that oh, we had to poke a hole for this, or we had to make this exception to do these sort of things. I wonder how often, when those original use cases disappear, that people go back in and say, we don't need that hole anymore. Let's close it. We don't have that use case anymore. Let's undo what we did to support that use case. I know in my own life, it's oh, let me poke a hole for this, poke a hole for that. And then years later, I'm like, why did I do that? I'm like, I did that. I left that open for that long. Like that, I just needed that for 15 minutes. How could I have forgotten that?
So two quick examples of that. Working with one company, we did the testing for them, and they're like, "What's this jump server? Why do we still have this jump server?" And they finally go to it, and it's like, "It's a Windows 7 jump server. Why do we still have this?" And it's just like you said, right? They needed it for something, it was used, and then it was totally forgotten about. On a personal note, going a little bit back in the time machine, when Heartbleed came out, my parents were actually in Florida, and they wanted to connect back to Canada to watch some web shows and things like that. So I set up a VPN server in my house,
Yeah.
just extra machine, threw it up, stood up in the corner, put on a segmented network, totally forgot about it, right? Heartbleed happens. And about 6 weeks after Heartbleed happens, I go, what's that thing in my corner over there? What's that machine running? So I go over and I hop on and I'm like, oh my God, it's fully compromised, right? So there's a perfect example of somebody who's in the industry stands something up because they had a need because my parents wanted to watch their
Yep.
web episodes and totally forgot about it. And then it gets compromised. And we wonder how these things happen. Happens to everybody, right? It's the best intent.
I'm sure there is a machine in the closet of almost every single business that's been open for 10 years that nobody knows what it does. And there's a sticker on it that says, don't turn this off.
That's right. That's very true.
So, I won't say ransomware is inevitable, but for those that, get ransomed, there's this discussion of, do you pay, do you not pay, should the government, like, I know there was discussion, the US government was thinking about making ransomware payments to particular organizations criminal. Like, how do we navigate that aspect, or what do you consult with your customers? How do you help your customers navigate what to do?
That's really hard, right? You're in that moment and bad things are happening to you, and there's somebody saying, "Hey, we've done these bad things to you, and I make this pain go away if you do this," right? And then you get that whole moral and ethical conversation, right? paying ransomware fuels the RAS ecosystem, right? That's what they're counting on. You think about Lockbit, there's reports over 120 million extorted from victims over the past, several years of it. It's a really hard thing. I think one of the best things we can do is do our best to avoid it, but
Yep.
recognize it's going to happen. Um, and do, the basic things, right? I call it eating your vegetables, right? It's patch, it's have separation of duty, it's having dual custodians, it's two-factor authentications, it's having reliable backups. I think one of the best pieces of advice I heard from my team this week when we were talking about this was your backup servers should not be part of your necessarily domain system or your centralized authentication system. They should stand on their own with their own authentication and very strong authentication controls and strong passwords and no password reuse and limited access. So if something bad does go and they get your credentials or they get Active Directory or they get admin or they get a golden token or something, you still have the ability to protect that
Yeah.
backups from there. And I guess the other thing too is, encryption at rest, encryption in motion, all the things we talked about for years is important, right? If someone steals your data, and you are a company that does consumer facing stuff, and your RSA 4096 encrypted, people go, hey, that's really great, but we know, 30 years from now, maybe they'll break that encryption, right? Even though they stole your data.
Yeah.
At that point, is the data even useful anymore, right? It's going to be addresses, it's going to be credit card numbers, things like that. So I think just again, the basics really help, and then being prepared for when it happened. Testing your response to what takes place. What am I going to do when this happens? This is not if, but when, right? Almost every company at some point is going to face this dilemma. It's not something I'd want anyone to go through, but it's kind of like, why do we do fire drills in schools,
Yep.
right? We don't expect schools to burn down. We don't expect something bad to happen. But if it does, are we prepared and are we going to respond to it appropriately?
And kind of my running, I don't know, not a joke, but whenever I hear people talk about backup, please test your backup processes.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know of anybody who's had a significant issue where they've had to go to backups that didn't have problems and weren't able to recover everything because the backups weren't working in the way they thought they were working.
Absolutely. If you're not practicing disaster recovery and switching over to secondary sites and secondary, lines and things like that, when the pressure is not on, what's going to happen when the pressure is on, right? I remember doing simple things back when I was a single admin for a small company and go, what happens if all my servers go away? And I've got these tapes and I got a Tower of Hanoi rotation and I have a full backup and partials on these, how do I restore it? My gosh, it was quite stressful. So I couldn't imagine trying to do it when the world's on fire and everyone's screaming to be back up and running and customers want access to their data. So your advice is well placed, test your backups.
There was someone that I knew that they would do their full backup was like once a year. Their full kind of that master reset backup was once a year, and that they had tape backups for the differential for every week. And I thought, well, how long does it take to do like that weekly differential the restore from that? Oh, it takes like 3 hours. And I'm like, you realize that like if it's week 51 and you have to restore, you're talking like I don't know what is that
150.
150 hours of you're talking like 5 or 6 days of down just to run your restore process. And he's like, oh, I didn't think about that.
Right. It sounds great, right? Doing incrementals and things like that. And even today, right, with some of the nearby and cold storage and cloud storage, even personally at home, right? Backing up to the cloud because I'm upgrading our home computers. Restoring everything from there can just even for our home can take hours, if not days, to pull down all the data again. So you're right. We need to take that into account.
Yeah. So I noticed you, I'll put you in a spot here. I noticed you kind of avoided the do you pay or do you not pay ransomware.
Yeah.
What are the thought processes that you would give your customer that you would give a customer on how to not what decision to make, but what things to consider in that decision?
I think that it's going to be individual by the industry, by the type of business you have, the type of things you can do. Um, it's not an easy conversation. It's not an easy
Yeah.
decision for anyone to make. I know that some of the governments, government agencies, and different industry bodies are starting to bring some regulation to it to help you make decisions on it. And then, of course, you're kind of either way the bad guy in the situation, right? If you don't pay the ransomware, people say, well, if you don't pay the ransomware, I would have got my data back. And you pay the ransomware, they go, well, you're the bad guy. You're enabling the attackers to keep doing what they're doing. You're the problem, right? So it's a no-win
Yeah.
situation. I think that there's a lot of really good companies out there to turn to get help. We recently did a webcast with myself and a legal expert talking about some of the legal implications of cybersecurity. And there's a really good conversation he had on there about, paying ransomwares and things like that. And it's situational. And
Yeah.
I would never be one to judge anyone for what they did or how they did what they did. Um, so from my standpoint, it's really not my story to tell. It belongs to each individual
Yeah.
as they experience it and how they react to it. My biggest advice is to listen to the experts, listen to the people around you, and come to a conclusion that everyone can support, not necessarily align with, but at least support your path forward. I think the biggest things, as we saw over the weekend, right, with that crypto heist.
Yeah.
How did that company respond? Open, transparently, constant communication, working with partners. It's really a shining example of how you respond to an incident like that. And really, I think that companies being honest and upfront as quickly as they can when things like this happen just puts them in a much better light. I think transparency
Yeah.
and the bright light of transparency just makes things so much better.
Yeah. The cover up is almost always worse than the crime.
Yeah, and again, this
Not always, but
so
often.
it's so hard.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're seeing government doing in a positive way, or some challenges that because like sure you're working to protect an individual client, but you're not a law enforcement agency. You can't shut down these organizations. Do you see that government is going to be able to take them out in any serious way, or is it just a hydra where you lop off one head and it's going to be back again a week later?
Well, that's the hard part about ransomware as a service, right? Because the distributed nature of it's so hard. We see a lot of, intergovernmental and interdepartment support and investigations taking place. There's large players in the industry that are actively working with government and law enforcement to take down these gangs and to address those threats. I think that as we mature continuously in our cybersecurity world, we're going to find better ways to work together. And I think that private-public partnership is a really important aspect to it. Our governments don't have unlimited funds and
Yeah.
unlimited resources as well. A lot of times they're not necessarily experts in the systems being attacked or systems held for ransom. So we in the industry have a responsibility to work where we can with government and other agencies to support them when the time comes and try to build regulations that support, proactive disclosure and not necessarily punishing the company that's attacked, although there are times when there's a lack of due diligence and
Yeah.
due care, and that needs to be investigated. But in general, I think we need to be in a world right now where we encourage people to be open and honest about what's taking place and bring it out of the shadows and bring it to the forefront and let us address it in a helpful way.
Yeah. Do you have any research, any resources online that kind of talk about the latest threats and the industry?
Yeah, so we have on our website we have an area there for the adversary research team. We have some really great content and blogs up there about some of the latest adversary that are developing and coming. That's a really great resource. I think the other thing that AttackIQ has is we have our AttackIQ Academy, where tens of thousands of people have gone through, all kinds of different learnings in the cybersecurity world. I've taken a number of courses from there. They've been very excellent. And they cover everything from, simple incident response and OSINT to more detailed things about, how do I measure my risk? How much tells my exposure? So I think those things that AttackIQ offers really helps us and help our customers become more cyber secure and cyber resilient.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link to those in the show notes as well. If people want to get a hold of you or Attack IQ, where can they find you guys online?
So obviously, the website, attackiq.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. That seems to be the primary method we've been using lately to share information. The LinkedIn community has been very, very active and very supportive. So that's a really great place to find us. And of course, we have our website and our own channel on LinkedIn as well for AttackIQ.
Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed it.